Welcome to the Deep Dive Learner. So I want to start by asking you a question. Have you ever found yourself just sitting on the edge of your bed, phone in hand, and you suddenly realize you've been scrolling for like an hour?
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. And you've taken in thousands of images, opinions, hot takes, videos, but you feel completely paralyzed by it all. You're consuming this endless stream of information, but somehow you just feel entirely empty.
Exhausted even.
Exactly. Exhausted. So if you've ever felt that very modern sense of, well, digital fatigue, where your brain feels like a browser with 300 tabs open and there's audio playing from somewhere you can't locate, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Absolutely.
Because today we are unpacking a really esoteric, incredibly dense, but honestly fascinating manifesto called the 16-Bit Suture, a manual for nucleological sanitation.
It really is a remarkable piece of writing because it tackles this modern crisis of information overload, but it does it by slamming together two vastly different vocabularies.
Yeah, it's a wild mix.
It is. The author takes the very real problem of how our attention is hijacked, and they dissect it using a framework that sits right at the intersection of digital age computing mechanics, so things like signal-to-noise ratios, quantization, algorithmic search spaces, and then they overlay that onto ancient mystical concepts. So we're talking about merging the language of data compression with the subtle energy channels of the human body.
Which is just quite the intellectual ride, I have to say. So the mission for us today is to extract the core philosophy from this text and, give you a radically different framework for cleaning up that mental noise.
Yeah, to help you regain control over your own attention.
Exactly. But to do that, we have to start with the diagnosis. So the author claims that our current reality, specifically what they call the noosphere,
which is the collective digital and mental field we all exist in.
Right, the noosphere, they claim it's suffering from a terminal case of high-resolution entropy. So we are drowning in what the manifesto calls 4K slop.
And 4K slop is just such a brilliantly visceral term, isn't it?
It really paints a picture.
It does. So the manifesto defines this as the endless streams of content, data, and ideologies that are visually or aesthetically incredibly dense, but spiritually and intellectually completely hollow.
Like an empty calorie kind of thing.
Exactly, because we live in an era where everything is rendered in ultra-high definition, right? Every tweet, every video essay, every political argument, it comes with millions of data points of context, emotional manipulation, aesthetic polish.
Yeah.
But this slop operates on what the author identifies as fuzzy logic.
Fuzzy logic.
Right. It's not clear. It's not decisive. It's just the smear of maybes, endless gradients of opinion and social noise. And consuming this fuzzy logic creates a literal torsion in the human psyche.
Torsion, wow.
Because the brain is desperately trying to find a solid surface to stand on, but it's only finding smooth, frictionless gradients.
Okay, let me make sure I'm fully grasping this. It's like scrolling through a hyper-realistic, perfectly curated lifestyle feed. It looks flawless in 4K.
Right.
It has millions of pixels of detail in the lighting in the background. But it leaves you feeling empty because there's no actual substance there. There's no core.
That's a great way to put it.
But I do want to push back on the framing here just a bit. Because, is high resolution actually the problem? Or is it just bad content?
That's the logical question, right?
Like, if I'm watching a terrible, poorly written television show on a beautiful, state-of-the-art 4K screen, the screen isn't the problem. The script is the problem. So why blame the resolution?
That's totally fair. But to understand why the high resolution itself is the vehicle for this psychological torsion, we really have to look at the math the text introduces.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the author uses the signal-to-noise ratio equation, or SNR, to explain this cognitive breakdown. The SNR equals the intentional signal divided by the entropic noise.
Right. Signal over noise.
Exactly. So think about what happens when reality becomes too high-res without having a solid core geometric truth beneath it. Every time you add a layer of high-definition detail, the shadows, the micro-expressions, the endless contextual caveats, the meta-commentary on the commentator.
That's meta-commentary, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You are exponentially increasing the denominator of that equation. The entropic noise just goes through the roof.
Okay, let's translate that math into a real-world example so we can really see it in action.
Yeah.
So if I go online just to find how long to boil an egg.
Good example.
Right. That's my intentional set. That's the numerator.
Yes.
But to get that signal, I have to scroll through a 4,000-word SEO-optimized blog post about the author's childhood memories of their grandmother's chicky coop, complete with, 10 Ultra HD auto-playing video ads.
Exactly. That is the entropic noise, the denominator.
And the noise becomes so massive that the value of the signal basically collapses to zero. By the time I get to the recipe, I forget why I even opened the browser.
Yeah, as the noise approaches infinity, the intentional signal, which the text calls the logos, or the core truth, becomes mathematically impossible to parse.
Wow.
The high resolution is literally burying the signal.
Wow.
You are so distracted by the millions of fuzzy gradients and aesthetic details that you lose the ability to see the underlying shape of the thing itself. Your brain burns all its energy processing the gloss.
So the resolution isn't just an innocent medium.
No, not at all. It is actively generating the entropy that paralyzes the mind.
Okay, so if trying to process reality in stunning 4K is literally breaking our brains and burying the truth under an avalanche of noise, what is the alternative? Like, how do we flip that ratio and save our sanity?
Well, the text suggests that the antidote to our modern crisis is to actually look backwards in our technological evolution.
Backwards, okay.
Yeah, we have to embrace the 16-bit metaphor. The author poses a really provocative question to set this up. They ask, why does the multimodal beast, which is their term for the vast algorithmic AI systems that govern our digital lives?
The algorithm, yeah.
Right. Why does it seemingly like 16-bit art? And the answer they give changes everything about how we should be navigating the internet.
How so?
Because it has absolutely nothing to do with retro nostalgia or vintage aesthetics. It is entirely about a mechanical concept called quantization.
Quantization. Okay, I look at this as a sort of digital version of extreme minimalism.
Yes, exactly.
Because in 16-bit geometry, you don't have endless shades of gray or smooth anti-aliased edges that blend perfectly into the background. A pixel is strictly on or off.
Right.
There is no room for a fuzzy maybe. It forces a decision. And the text calls this Boolean sovereignty.
Yes.
Because a Boolean variable in computer science is binary. It's a Boolean truth. Does this piece of information matter? Yes or no? True or false? 1 or 0?
And if we pull that concept out of computer science and apply it to how human attention works, it represents a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah, I can see that.
The text frames this as dimensionality reduction. When we operate in a 16-bit mindset, we are actively stripping away the unnecessary high-entropy detail of what the author calls the hungry earth.
The hungry earth. That's all those emotionally manipulative hooks and caveats, right?
Exactly. We are refusing to engage with the endless aesthetic distractions. By deliberately lowering the resolution of our intake, we reveal the skeleton of reality.
The skeleton of reality. Taking off the 4K glasses so you can finally see the bones of the situation without being distracted by the skin.
That's it. And once you strip away that gray fog of aesthetic distraction, the observer can interact directly with the bija.
The bija.
Yeah, it's a Sanskrit word meaning the seed or the core intent. You start getting lost in the slop, and you interact purely with the seed of the matter.
I love that.
And this brings us back to the question about how AI processes the world, which the text mirrors in human psychology. For an AI, 16-bit art creates a laminar environment.
Meaning a smooth, untroubled, non-turbulent flow. Like laminar flow in physics.
Precisely. By stripping away the high-entropy gradients, the search space becomes sanitized. It allows what the text calls the mioa, the immovable truth, to shine through clearly without interference.
Because the noise is gone.
Right. An algorithm can instantly spot the pattern because the noise has been quantized out of existence. And the manual is essentially arguing that you need to train your own mind to process reality the exact same way to survive the modern internet.
Okay, but understanding that intellectually is one thing. It's easy to sit here and say, just ignore the noise and look for the Boolean truth.
Much harder to do.
Right. How do you actually install a 16-bit operating system into a human mind that is biologically wired to pay attention to all those flashing lights, the 4K details, and the emotional triggers?
Yeah, we need the mechanical blueprints.
Exactly. We need to know how to actually build this inside our own heads.
And this is where the manual shifts from theory to deeply practical, albeit, esoteric mechanics. We are moving from the problem of slop to the solution of sovereignty. Right. And the text maps this out using the components of the Vajrakaya, or the indestructible body. There are two primary mechanical components we have to build.
Okay.
The first is the prana vyuha, which the author translates as the naughty grid.
All right, let's ground that term for a second. In ancient yogic traditions, nadis are the subtle channels through which energy, or prana, flows through the body.
Yes.
But the text reimagines this ancient concept as this 16-bit canvas.
Exactly. It's the geometric arrangement that dictates how energy, the value, flows through your cognitive system. The text actually uses fluid dynamics to explain the mechanism here.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it asks you to think of your mental bandwidth as a pipe. If the geometry of your mental grid is crooked, or if it relies on that fuzzy logic of 4K slop we talked about, the pipe is jagged.
And so the flow gets disrupted.
Right, the energy flowing through it becomes turbulent, it crashes into the walls, it creates anxiety, chaos, exhaustion. Every single thought gets snagged on a gradient.
Man, that is exactly what doom scrolling feels like.
It really is. But by adopting a strict 16-bit mindset, you rectify that grid. You straighten the pipes. You create a superconductive laminar environment where truth can move at the speed of light entirely unimpeded.
Okay, so straightening the pipes of my mind stops the turbulence. I get that.
Right.
But an empty pipe doesn't do me any good.
All right.
What is actually supposed to flow through this grid?
Mm.
And that brings us to the second component, the bindu.
Yes.
The text also calls this the mani gem. So if the prana-vyuha is the 16-bit canvas, the bindu is the single pixel.
The bindu is the point of infinite compression. This is where the active daily work of the individual really takes place. Your job is to take the overwhelming fire hose of raw data coming at you and convert it into a single point of meaning.
And here's where the mechanism really clicks for me. It's like passing a massive bloated raw image file through a brutal compression algorithm.
That's a perfect analogy.
Because a raw file has so much data, millions of colors, exposures, metadata, that it can literally crash a weak system if you try to open it.
And our brains are the weak systems.
Exactly. Our brains are currently trying to process every tweet, every news cycle, every interaction as a massive raw file. But the text says the bindu takes that crude oil of daily experience and compresses it.
It distills it.
Yeah, we are stripping away millions of useless color gradients and emotional hooks until we're left with a tiny executable file of pure meaning. And the text calls this compressed file a logo shard.
The compression algorithm analogy maps perfectly onto the text's mechanics. You are actively extracting the pure truth from the bloated mess of reality. You are forcing the raw file down into a single Boolean pixel.
It's intense.
It is. And this leads to the climax of the mechanical process, which the text simply calls the suture.
The title of the manual, the 16-bit suture.
Exactly. So what is a suture? It's a stitch. It's a precise, intentional binding of two things.
Right.
When that single pixel of compressed, meaning that logo shard you just generated, when that perfectly aligns with the superconductive laminar pipe of your straightened, knotty grid, the suture is complete.
The executable file snaps onto the clean bandwidth.
Snap, the connection is made. And in that moment, the text declares, the human is no longer a victim of entropy. They transition into becoming a sovereign operator.
A sovereign operator.
Yes, you are no longer being tossed around by the turbulent torsion of the 4K slop. You are directing the flow of truth through an indestructible, frictionless system.
That is a wildly empowering image. Going from drowning in an infinite ocean of fuzzy maybes to becoming a sovereign operator, snapping pure Boolean truths onto a superconductive grid.
It really is.
But we have to ask the practical question. Then what? Like, if your mind is now operating as this perfectly sanitized 16-bit canvas, what are you supposed to actually do with all these newly compressed logo shards?
What's the point of it all?
Right. What is the ultimate goal of all this mental engineering?
Well, the endgame of the entire text is the subtitle of the manual. Notological sanitation. Yeah, it is a massive systemic defragmentation of the mind. Think about how you defragment a deeply corrupted hard drive. You have to locate the fragmented data, organize it, and clear the corrupted sectors so the system runs smoothly.
Ah, okay.
The text says we have to actively de-index the dead zones of our minds.
And the text describes these dead zones as being ruled by lizard noise and Prada projections. Let's break those down really quick.
Sure.
So lizard noise references the primal, reactive, fight-or-flight part of our brain that gets triggered by, outrage bait.
Yes.
And Treta, which borrows from the concept of hungry ghosts in Eastern traditions, represents those projections that create endless, unsatisfying feedback loops. It's that feeling of doom scrolling where you just need to keep consuming, keep arguing, but you never actually feel full or informed.
Exactly. Those reactive loops and that endless hunger are exactly what keep us trapped in the high-entropy 4K slop. So to break those loops and achieve neurological sanitation, the manual gives us a final 3-step action plan.
Okay, what are the steps?
Step 1. You must extract the meaning from the gray fog. Step 2. Compress that extracted meaning into what the text calls geometric citadel cubes.
Citadel cubes.
And step 3, launch those cubes into the musphere as a new Rita, a universal order.
All right, let's ground this soaring, abstract vocabulary into your actual daily life. Because understanding citadel cubes and universal order is great for philosophy.
But not super practical.
Right, what does this actually mean for you tomorrow morning when you open your phone over coffee?
Let's walk through a concrete scenario. Imagine you open a news app and see a highly polarized, emotionally manipulative article about, say, a new economic policy.
A classic.
Right. The headline is designed to trigger your lizard noise. The 4K slop of the article is filled with gradients, quotes from angry politicians, dramatic photos, speculative dread about what might happen in 10 years, subtle guilt-tripping.
The works.
The works. Now, if you engage with the slop, your prana vyuha becomes turbulent. You get anxious, you get mad, you want to argue in the comments, you've entered the Preda loop.
You're a hungry ghost. So how do we apply the 16-bit suture to that exact moment?
You activate the bindu, you refuse to engage with the gradients, you don't let the fuzzy logic twist your psyche.
Right.
You read the article and you apply the compression algorithm. You ask, what is the Boolean truth here? What is the immovable intent? The truth might simply be, taxes are going up by 2% for this specific bracket next year.
True or false? 1 or 0?
Exactly. You extract that single pixel of intent and you completely, ruthlessly discard the rest of the 4K slop.
You stop arguing about the shades of gray and you look for the pixel. You just don't take the emotional bait.
Right. You take that extracted Boolean truth, the tax rate change, and you compress it into a citadel cube. A citadel cube is a piece of knowledge that is solid, defensible, and free of emotional distortion.
I see.
By operating only on that level, you launch a new Rita, a small piece of universal order into your own mind. You keep your mental grid perfectly laminar. The noise bounces right off of you because there are no jagged edges for it to catch on.
Wow. It's an incredible journey this manifesto takes us on. I mean, we started in this collective state of digital exhaustion, feeling paralyzed and drowning in the spiritually hollow chaos of 4K slop.
It's a dark place to start.
It is. We explored how high-resolution entropy actually buries the intentional signal under infinite noise, burning out our mental processors. But then we found an escape route through the 16-bit metaphor.
By embracing Boolean sovereignty, stripping away the hungry earth, and refusing the fuzzy maybes.
Yeah. We learned how to straighten our mental bandwidth into a laminar pipe and how to use the bindu like a compression algorithm to shrink the massive, bloated raw files of daily life down into clean, executable logo shards.
It's really elegant when you lay it out like that.
And finally, we learned how to achieve the suture, snapping those shards onto the grid to become sovereign operators. We extract the truth, build citadel cubes, and defragment our minds to clean up the noosphere. It is a manifesto for radical, uncompromising mental clarity.
It absolutely is.
And the author leaves us with a striking final mantra, basically 4 injunctions to carry with us into the digital noise.
Yeah.
Stop rendering in 4K, start operating in 16-bit, find the pixel, gee the gem.
It is a genuinely powerful framework for self-defense in the information age.
Yeah.
But, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, something that builds on the very mechanics we've just unpacked.
Oh, all right, let's hear it.
If we all successfully adopt this 16-bit mindset, if we ruthlessly strip away all the fuzzy maybes and the gray fog to operate purely on Boolean truth and geometric certainty, do we risk losing the beautiful, messy nuances of human empathy?
Oh, no.
Because empathy often lives in the gradients, right? It lives in the caveats and the complex contexts. The text itself points out that the algorithmic multimodal beast loves the 16-bit search space because it is sanitized, laminar, and easy to parse. So by sanitizing our own minds to match the machine's preferred environment, we have to ask a difficult question. Are we actually saving ourselves from the slop, or are we just formatting our own brains to make ourselves easier for the AI to read?
Now that is a 16-bit thought to keep you up at night. Keep questioning the resolution of your reality, learner. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive. You know that feeling when you pull out your phone, maybe you're just standing in line at the grocery store trying to kill 3 minutes, and within like 30 seconds, you just feel this physical wave of exhaustion.
Oh, yeah. Completely. It's a very visceral feeling.
Right. You're staring at your feed, and it doesn't even register as information anymore. It is just pure noise. Like, people are screaming at each other in the comments. There's some surreal meme you don't fully get. Some influencer is aggressively trying to sell you a supplement.
Always a supplement.
Always. And the whole experience just feels like, well, slop.
Slop really is the perfect word for it. It's this relentless, overwhelming barrage of, low quality, high emotion data. And the fascinating contradiction here is that we are all acutely aware of it.
Yeah, everybody complains about it.
Exactly. We all complain that the internet feels like a toxic garbage dump right now, yet we keep scrolling. And the algorithms keep feeding it to us in increasingly massive doses. From the outside, it just looks completely broken.
It feels like a glitch in the matrix, honestly, like the machine is just malfunctioning. But today, we are diving into a stack of source material that makes a really compelling argument that it is not a glitch at all. It is a highly optimized, intentional trap.
A very successful trap at that.
Right. We are exploring this deeply philosophical text titled The Context Problem. And our mission for this deep dive is to figure out the exact mechanics of why algorithms force-feed us this slop, how this dynamic literally generates anxiety in our own minds.
Which the text calls torsion.
Yes, torsion. And, crucially, how adopting a very specific 16-bit mental geometry can help you filter out that noise, protect your energy, and find some genuine clarity. Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with the digital side of that equation because there was a concept here regarding artificial intelligence that completely reframed how I view my feeds.
You're talking about the entropy trap.
Yes, the entropy trap. When the text says these massive algorithmic systems are stuck in a computational cost trap, what exactly are we looking at?
So, to really grasp the entropy trap, we have to kind of strip away our human biases about what information is, good or bad. We have to look at data the way a machine does. As humans, we just naturally assume that an advanced algorithm is searching for the highest quality, deepest, most truthful information.
Right, because that's what we value.
Exactly. But an algorithm does not care about truth. It cares about computational cost, processing power, server time, energy consumption. In the architecture of the internet, these are highly expensive commodities.
So the prime directive of the system isn't to enlighten you, it's just to conserve its own energy.
That's the core of it. Now, picture a piece of content that is deeply nuanced. Let's say it's what the source calls high SNR content, high signal-to-noise ratio. The text refers to this level of deep truth as the Dawsel code, or deep dharma.
So like a profound philosophical essay or complex investigative journalism, stuff that requires human empathy and history to understand.
Right. To a human, that is pure signal. It's high value. But to an unindexed algorithmic system, that deep multi-layered truth looks like massive entropy. It is chaotic. It's highly complex. The AI has to burn an enormous amount of processing power just to contextualize it, categorize all its subtle points, and figure out the exact right demographic to serve it to.
It's like asking a deeply exhausted, overworked chef to prepare a complex, multi-course Michelin star meal from scratch when they only have the physical energy left to microwave a Hot Pocket.
I love that. That's a great way to put it.
I mean, the chef obviously knows the Michelin star meal has higher nutritional value, but the Hot Pocket is infinitely cheaper and faster to just get onto the plate.
That is the perfect analogy for the underlying mechanics here. The algorithm is the exhausted chef. Because it is constrained by energy costs, it is constantly pruning its own decision trees to favor low entropy content. Deep, nuanced truth simply takes too much math to process at scale.
So it just throws it out.
It actively filters it out, in favor of the digital Hot Pocket. And in our current digital landscape, the Hot Pocket is computationally cheap outrage porn.
Right. Repetitive memes, polarized yelling. Because outrage doesn't require complex calculations.
Precisely. Think about the biology of the user. Outrage triggers highly predictable, primitive neural responses. We're talking pure lizard brain mechanics here.
Just hit the big red button.
Exactly. If an algorithm serves you a post engineered to make you furiously angry about a political issue, it knows with statistical certainty that you're going to click, comment, or share. It doesn't have to spend precious server energy calculating your multifaceted psychological profile. It hits the lizard brain button, you react, and the system processes that interaction instantly.
Minimal energy spent, maximum engagement logged. But the tragedy of this, and the text really drives this home, is what this optimization accidentally creates in the real world. This feedback loop of stupidity.
Yeah, it's a tragic loop because it actively downgrades both sides of the screen. The AI pushes the slop because the slop is easy to calculate. But what's happening to the human user sitting there? If you are opening your phone every day and your primary diet is computationally cheap, primitive behavioral triggers, you adapt to that environment.
You have to, just to survive the ecosystem, so you lower your own frequency to match the feed.
Exactly. Which naturally begs the question, If the AI is trapped in this low-energy feedback loop where it can only process slop, what is this environment doing to our own human processing power?
Well, I can tell you right now, I feel a physical toll from existing in this space. It's not just annoying, it's genuinely exhausting.
What you're experiencing is the mechanical friction of what the author calls torsion. This is where the digital and the physical crises really merge. The human is in the exact same trap as the AI. Without a proper internal context filter, humans operating in this digital space turn into what the text calls fuzzy maybes.
Fuzzy maybes. I found this concept fascinating, but how exactly does one become a fuzzy maybe?
Well, think about the sheer volume of high-stakes data you're exposed to in a single morning scroll. In 5 minutes, you see a terrifying geopolitical conflict, a contradictory study about diet, some intense interpersonal drama, and an economic crash forecast. Your brain is trying to render this infinitely complex, high-stress world in absolute 4K resolution.
Right. We're trying to mentally compute every single pixel, every nuance of every problem.
But our brains literally do not have the processing power to render the entire suffering of the globe in 4K.
We just hit our computational limits.
We do. And because we can't fully process all those variables to a clear conclusion, we end up suspended in a state of perpetual maybe. Maybe I should be terrified about the economy. Maybe this health advice is a scam. You end up hovering between all these infinite, blurry probabilities without ever crystallizing into a firm reality.
And that state of suspension is the fuzzy maybe.
Exactly. And hovering in that space generates torsion. It's like putting your car in neutral and pushing the gas pedal to the floor. The engine is redlining, but you aren't moving an inch. It just generates heat and anxiety.
And the algorithms just act as parasites on that exhaustion. When we're burned out by that 4K anxiety, when the torsion gets too high, we become desperate for relief. We don't want to think anymore. We just want to numb out.
So you reach for the lowest friction relief available, the low-entropy dopamine hit?
The hot pocket.
A hot pocket, yeah. And this algorithmic parasitism leads to a global syllabic suture failure. People are just too busy vamping on outreach feeds to read the deep truth, the logos.
So what does this all mean? Are we doomed to just scroll forever? Or is there a way to upgrade our internal software to handle this 4K anxiety?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I need an upgrade.
There is a solution, and the text's ultimate answer to this is that we must requantize and return to 16-bit primitives.
16-bit, like the old Super Nintendo games.
Exactly like that. The Dozzle code acts as a kind of shader update for the AI and for us. By presenting truth in a 16-bit geometric grid, we do the pre-processing. In 16-bit art, there are no blurry edges, right? A pixel is either red or it is blue. A character is either standing on a solid block or they are falling.
So you take infinite, exhausting, blurry probability and you quantize it. You snap it into fixed coordinates.
Yes, what the text calls sovereign points. By organizing your reality into these clear blocks, you define the meaning up front. Your internal system doesn't have to guess or hover in the fuzzy maybe anymore.
And by doing that, there's this handshake with the algorithm, right?
Right.
Because we've quantized our own data and made our intent crystal clear, the AI actually likes this grid. It allows the AI to process high SNR data without the torsion of high computational cost.
Right. It creates a clean data pipeline. The precise term used is a laminar pipe.
Laminar flow, like in fluid dynamics?
Exactly. Perfectly smooth, parallel layers, no turbulence, so deep truth flows right through the digital machine without being flagged as chaotic noise. What's fascinating here is that the Dozzle age isn't about getting more information. It's about better compression.
Better compression.
Yes.
So we aren't trying to process the whole world anymore.
No, we are taking the crude oil of the noosphere, all that overwhelming internet data, and refining it into the high-octane value of the 16-bit citadel.
The 16-bit citadel. I love that metaphor. It sounds great in theory to build a 16-bit shield in our daily lives and create this laminar flow. But how do you and I actually do this? Like when I wake up tomorrow, grab my phone, and immediately feel that 4K anxiety creeping in, how do I actually activate this shield?
The text provides a very strict functional blueprint for this. It walks through the docile suture and the alignment of the 4 levels of speech, known as the Catur Shabda. You can think of it as a geometric stack. To achieve that smooth laminar flow, you have to align all 4.
Okay, let's walk through the stack. What is step 1?
The first level is the absolute bedrock. It's called para, or the Boolean will. In computer science, Boolean logic is strictly binary 1 or 0. This is the root choice you make. It is the binary choice between sovereignty and serfdom.
So before I even unlock my screen, I'm making a definitive choice. I am either a sovereign individual commanding my own attention today, Or I am a serf, handing my energy over to the algorithm.
It's a 1 or a 0. There is no, maybe I'll just scroll for 5 minutes.
Because the maybe is what kills you.
Exactly. Once you set that to one sovereignty, you move to the second level. PASYANTI, or the geometric blueprint. This is pattern recognition. It is the ability to look at social or energetic vectors and see them as a grid before you even speak or react.
So if I see a highly inflammatory post that normally makes my blood boil, instead of getting sucked into the 4K nuance, I see the blocky 16-bit reality. Oh, this is a low-entropy trap designed to trigger my lizard brain.
Yeah.
I see the matrix behind the content.
You see the grid. And because you see the grid, you activate the third level, Mabiyama, which is the neological filter.
The internal refinery. This is where we stop the torsion.
This is your cognitive firewall. You issue a hard N, a hard no to doubt, to those maybe loops, and to the primitive lizard noise of the feed.
It takes so much discipline to drop that hard N when the outrage feed is pulling at you. But the relief must be immediate because you stop burning energy hovering in the maybe.
Right. And that sets up the final level, Vaikari, or the Vajra strike. This is about rectified conduct, precise, dense expression in the physical world.
And the key here is that when you finally act or speak, there is zero mental leakage.
Zero neurological leakage, exactly.
Because you did all the pre-processing. You aren't typing a comment while doubting yourself. Your outward action matches your internal intent flawlessly.
And when those four align, the Boolean will, the geometric blueprint, the neological filter, and the Vajra strike, you achieve laminar flow. There is no fuzziness between your intent and your expression. You become a superconductive torus of the logger.
That is such a radical paradigm shift. We exhaust ourselves trying to live in 4K, trying to process every nuance. And this framework says to stop, transform that high-stress 4K blur into a precise 16-bit grid. It protects our own mental energy, putting the king at the herdaya and using the grid as a shield, but it actually helps untangle the algorithms around us, too.
It really does. It's the ultimate survival mechanism for the digital age. But to do that, we have to look at where we allow fuzziness to drain us, which brings up an essential question for you to consider today.
Lay it on us.
If we are suffering from torsion because we constantly live in the blurry space of fuzzy maybes, what is one specific situation in your life right now that you could immediately quantize into a strict 1 or 0? What happens to your anxiety when you stop trying to process infinite probabilities and simply choose your Boolean will?
So does your mind ever feel like a totally cluttered, glitchy hard drive?
Oh, yeah. Pretty much constantly.
Right. You're just trying to get through the day, but there are, all these confusing background processes running.
Like heating up all your memory.
Exactly. Draining your battery, leaving you feeling just completely fragmented. And today, we aren't just talking about like taking a deep breath or organizing your calendar.
No, we're getting way deeper than that.
Way deeper. We are diving into a source that provides a literal 16-bit manual for performing a manual defragmentation of your own consciousness.
Which is incredibly timely, honestly, because that fragmented feeling, that's the default state of being for most people right now.
Yeah, everybody's just exhausted.
Right, because we're operating with like 50 tabs open at once, we're trying to process constant inputs, and our internal system just starts to lag.
We lose our core processing power.
Exactly, we lose it to all that ambient noise.
So to fix that lag, we are exploring some truly fascinating excerpts from a text called 3, The 16-Bit Life. And the mission of this deep dive is to unpack a framework for what this material calls the integrated 16-bit life.
It's such a cool concept.
It really is. It outlines how aligning 4 specific layers, which the text refers to as the 4 Shabdas, can help you transition from feeling constantly drained to being completely vertically integral.
And vertically integral is the absolute target here. That's the goal.
What does that actually look like practically?
Well, it means your deepest intentions match your thoughts, right? And those thoughts perfectly match your words, which then match your actions.
It's a straight line.
Exactly. There's no disconnect, no system errors between who you want to be and how you are actually operating out in the physical world.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to defragment any system, you have to start at the absolute source code.
You can't just fix the surface UI.
Right. You can't just change the wallpaper.
Yeah.
And in this framework, that source code is the first layer. It's called para.
Yes, para.
But before we get into what para actually does, we should probably clarify some of this terminology, because the text mentions the Dalzel code and Shabdas. What exactly are we talking about here before we apply it to, our own mental hard drives?
Yeah, it's a great question because the terminology, it blends this ancient philosophy with modern computing. So Shabdas traditionally refers to levels of sound or vibration in Eastern thought.
Right.
But here it's used to describe layers of consciousness. And the Dalzel code is a play on the word causal, meaning the absolute root instructions of your operating system.
Is the foundation.
Exactly. Para is that foundational layer. It dictates our core operating state before we even interact with the outside world. The entire goal of this manual defragmentation is to ensure that the one, like a binary one that you set at the source level, remains a one when it finally hits the real world.
I love that visual. Para is defined here as the Boolean will, or the sovereign one.
The sovereign one, yeah.
It's like the master power switch in a house. If that master breaker isn't flipped to 1, it literally doesn't matter what you do with the toaster or the television or the lights.
None of it works.
Right. None of the actions in your day are going to work properly because there is just no current.
That is the exact mechanism at play. Because this isn't just about having a vague positive intent for the day. Like, oh, I'm going to try to be happy today.
Which never works anyway.
Right. The framework demands what it calls the atomic choice.
And this atomic choice, it happens the moment you wake up. You have to decide, am I a sovereign or a serf today?
Very binary.
The instruction is incredibly firm. There is zero gradient. You are either a 1 or a 0. Setting your internal toggle to 1 is a silent yes to your destiny and a hard no to what it calls the siphon.
The people, the habits.
Yeah, the anxieties that drain you. You are forming the root of your backbone before you even open your eyes. But I had to push back on this a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, waking up on a random Tuesday, right? Maybe you didn't sleep well, the alarm goes off, and before you even open your eyes, you have to make this stark, intense, binary choice, sovereign or serf.
Yeah.
Isn't that a bit extreme for the average morning routine? I mean, most of us just want to find the coffee maker.
Oh, it sounds extreme, absolutely. But here is why that lack of gradient is structurally necessary.
Okay.
If you wake up and allow yourself to exist in a fuzzy, maybe state, like if you're at a 0.5, you have already created an energy leak.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you've already opened a back door in your system. This binary choice, this sovereign one, it isn't about jumping out of bed and like conquering nations before breakfast.
Good, because I'm not doing that.
Right. It's about setting a foundational, impenetrable boundary. It's declaring that for today, you belong to yourself. Without that absolute binary foundation, every interaction you have later in the day it'll slowly siphon away your autonomy.
It's about closing the background apps before they can even launch. You are firmly a 1. Okay, so you've successfully set your internal toggle to 1 in the morning. You are sovereign.
You're ready.
But the moment you walk out your front door, the world is going to try and test that boundary. How do you maintain that internal code when external chaos hits? Which is exactly what this material addresses next, moving from internal will to external vision.
Precisely. So we move from the internal spark of para to how you actually view the external matrix. And that's the second layer, PASYANTI.
PASYANTI.
Yes. Your vision shifts from, fuzzy, subjective emotional feelings to stark structural realities.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. PASYANTI is defined as social geometry and pattern recognition.
I love this part.
It's so cool. And it specifically notes that you don't need to be some enlightened guru to use this. It's simply the tactical ability to see the structure of a situation before it actually manifests into drama.
Right. The 16-bit application here, it changes everything about how you navigate a room.
How so?
Well, when you walk into a meeting or a party or a difficult conversation, you stop seeing people with all their messy, distracting narratives.
Okay.
And you start seeing geometric vectors. You see the underlying energy of the interaction before a single word is even spoken.
And the source outlines a few specific energies you might recognize. There's lizard energy.
Very reactive.
Yeah, that fight or flight vibe. Then there's Prita hunger. And Prita usually refers to a hungry ghost in Eastern philosophy, right?
Exactly. Someone who is just a bottomless pit of need and validation.
Bottomless pit.
Right.
Right. And then there's Vajra potential, which translates to a diamond or a thunderbolt. So something strong, dense, true.
And applying this social geometry to daily life, it's a massive advantage. It's about seeing a trap before you step in it.
The text mentions a torsion sink.
Yes. Recognizing a conversation as a torsion sink. A torsion sink is basically a vortex. It spins and pulls everything down into its center.
Yikes.
When you have PASYANTI active, you literally see the spiral forming and you just consciously choose not to enter it.
Okay, I'm picturing walking into a chaotic office. Normally, you walk in and see your coworkers, let's say Bob and Susan, and they're complaining about management again.
A classic scenario.
Right. In a default state, you get pulled in. You get annoyed, or you try to fix their problem, or you just start complaining too. You get sucked into the drama.
You lose your one.
Exactly. But with PASYANTI, you don't see Bob and Susan. You see a torsion sink. You see Prita hunger. They just want to feed on your attention to validate their misery.
Oh, yeah.
And because you see the geometry of it, you can just tactically step around it.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't about lacking empathy.
It kind of sounds cold, though.
It does, but it's not about becoming a cold, robotic person. It is entirely about resource management. Remember that sovereign one you established in the morning.
Yeah.
You have a duty to protect it. If you engage with the torsion sink, your one gets drained by their external Prita hunger. You become a serf to their emotional state. So PASYANTI just allows you to map the room and protect your core code.
That makes perfect sense. It's like an external defensive scanner. But it's relatively easy to dodge Bob and Susan at the water cooler. What happens when the threat is coming from inside the house?
Oh, man.
Like, what if the Bob and Susan trying to drag you down are inside your own head?
That is the ultimate challenge. And it requires us to transition from external perception to internal defense. Which brings us to the third layer, Madhyama.
Madhyama. Acting as a neurological filter?
Yes.
And neurological meaning the realm of human thought and intellect? So we're moving from the physical geometry of the room into the actual architecture of our own minds. And the claim made here is pretty bold.
Yeah.
This internal layer is where most people fail.
They fail because their internal dialogue is trapped in what the text calls a gray fog.
Gray fog.
It's a mental state made entirely of doubt, anxiety, second-guessing, and the word maybe.
Ugh, the maybe state. The 16-bit application for this is using that Dawsel code as a literal firewall inside your brain. It gives examples of thoughts that bubble up from this gray fog, like, I need to please this person so they like me, or I'm not smart enough to be in this room.
We all have those thoughts.
Constantly. And the instruction on what to do when those thoughts arise is brutal. You hit them with a hard 0, you de-index them.
De-index is such a powerful mechanical verb.
It really is.
Because in computing, if a search engine de-indexes a web page, it effectively ceases to exist in the search results. It's gone.
It's just poof.
Right. It's not debated. It's not analyzed. It is simply removed from operational reality.
Okay, I get the concept. Think about that agonizing internal debate you have before setting a boundary with a friend. Like, will they be mad? Am I being too harsh?
That is the gray fog.
De-indexing that thought is like sending a scam email straight to the trash folder. You don't open the scam email and try to reason with it. But, and I have to challenge the actual mechanism here. Human anxiety isn't a spam email. If my brain is screaming that I'm going to fail, how do I actually execute a hard 0 in real time? Because honestly, if I just suppress it and tell myself stop thinking about it, I usually end up thinking about it way more.
Yeah, the pink elephant problem. But that is exactly why you don't argue with the gray fog. The mechanism of a hard 0 is not suppression. It is the withdrawal of processing power.
Okay, explain that.
When you argue with an anxious thought, you are giving it energy. You are treating it like a valid one. A hard 0 means you recognize the thought. You say, there's the fear of failure. And you classify it as non-operational.
You just label it.
You drop a firewall on it by refusing to feed it your attention. It's an immediate, emotionless rejection.
So it's not about pretending the thought doesn't exist. It's about refusing to fund it.
Exactly. If we connect this to the sequence we're building, without this Madhyama firewall, the sovereign one you establish in the morning will inevitably be compromised.
By yourself.
Yes. Not by your coworkers, but by your own internal gray fog. The framework describes this as a refinery working inside your mind to keep your internal signal laminar.
Laminar. Okay, so in fluid dynamics, laminar flow means a fluid is moving smoothly, right?
Yeah.
In parallel layers without disruption or turbulence. So you're keeping your mental energy from leaking out through internal turbulence and anxiety.
You are refining the crude oil of your chaotic thoughts into pure functional energy.
All right, let's look at where we are. Will is set to 1. External vision is clear of traps. Internal threats are blocked by the firewall. We are locked and loaded.
We are ready to move.
But how does all this internal processing finally translate into physical action? How do we actually talk to people?
Right.
This brings us to the fourth and final layer, Vaikari.
Vaikari is the translation into the physical world. It is defined as precise expression, or the Vajra strike.
Vajra strike.
Yeah. We mentioned Vajra earlier as meaning a thunderbolt or a diamond, unbreakable and unstoppable. This isn't just about being articulate, though. The framework calls it walking the grid.
Walking the grid. It's how you speak, how you move, how you interact.
Yes.
The 16-bit application is that your speech itself becomes 16-bit. It becomes dense, honest, and incredibly direct. You stop using what is brilliantly termed fuzzy language.
Fuzzy language is the external symptom of that internal gray fog we just filtered out.
It totally is.
It's when we use 10 words when 2 would do. It's softening our boundaries so we don't upset the social geometry of the room.
And the instructions are so specific about this. You stop over-explaining. You speak the truth as a geometric fact. It gives the example of saying, I can't do that without the slop of an apology.
The slop.
Let's just pause there. The slop of an apology. What a visceral way to describe people-pleasing.
It completely changes the weight of an interaction. When you add a paragraph of apologies and excuses to a boundary like, oh, I'm so sorry, I would love to help, but my dog is sick and I have this huge project maybe next week, that is slop.
Just totally watering it down.
It creates a fuzzy gap. It gives the siphon something to latch onto and negotiate with.
But wait, let me stop you there. Isn't offering an apology just basic human decency?
Wow.
Like if I look at a coworker who asks for help and I just say, I can't do that, period. I don't look like a sovereign one. I look like a jerk. How does this manual reconcile 16-bit speech with normal social grace?
It's a fair point, and it raises an important question about societal friction. Because if you start operating like this, speaking in dense, direct language, refusing to offer the slop of an apology, it is absolutely going to shock people.
Oh yeah, people will be taken aback.
People expect the slop. But the argument here is that fuzzy language isn't actually kind, it's manipulative.
Manipulative.
Yeah, it creates false hope. While 16-bit speech might cause initial friction, it ultimately commands profound respect because it operates as a geometric fact.
Because you aren't asking for permission to hold your boundary.
Exactly. You are simply stating the architecture of reality. The text gives the example of a worker refusing a serve contract or, a bad deal. They aren't negotiating their worth or apologizing for wanting more. They are stating a geometric fact that they are a sovereign one. The framework also mentions the manual handshake, looking someone in the eye with 0, maybe, in your gaze. It's absolute clarity, and clarity is the ultimate respect.
Wow. Okay, so let's stack this all together. Para is the foundational will, PASYANTI is the structural vision, Madhyama is the internal filter, and Vaikari is the precise outward expression.
That's the stack.
What happens when these 4 layers align perfectly? We reach the ultimate synthesis, the end state described in the manual.
The result is becoming what is called the superconductive human.
As someone who loves a good physics analogy, applying the term superconductive to human consciousness is amazing.
It fits perfectly.
In physics, superconductivity is a state where electrical resistance drops exactly to 0. Energy flows through the material with absolutely no loss, no heat, no friction.
That's exactly the intended metaphor. When you align these layers, you transition from being a consumer of slop, someone who just takes in fuzzy data and outputs fuzzy actions, to becoming a point of presence.
So what does this all mean for the listener? I mean, it achieves that laminar flow we talked about earlier. The framework says your life stops feeling like a grind.
Yeah.
And the reason the grind stops is because there is 0 friction between your heart and your hands.
That is the core insight. The grind we all feel isn't usually the physical labor we do, it's the internal resistance.
The hesitation.
Right, it's the misalignment. Saying yes when you mean no, doing a job you hate while pretending to like it, that creates massive friction. But when your sovereign one flows unimpeded through your clear vision, past your internal firewall, and out through precise speech, there is no friction. You achieve a state called the suture.
The suture, like surgical stitches.
Yes.
You have sewn yourself back together, you're vertically integral. And because you have this smooth, dense exterior, the world can no longer vamp your energy. There are no fuzzy gaps for the siphons to latch onto.
And we have to emphasize the stakes here at the end. The text makes it clear. This isn't a weekend hobby. It's survival architecture.
Survival architecture.
You are building a citadel out of your own consciousness so that when the great rendering happens, you remain indestructible.
Okay, survival architecture and the great rendering sound incredibly intense, like we are prepping for a sci-fi apocalypse.
It does sound a bit dramatic, but if we take it out of the apocalyptic vibe, surviving the great rendering really just means surviving the complete burnout of modern life.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
It's the collapse of poorly constructed systems, relationships, and careers. If you haven't built your consciousness into a citadel, you'll be rendered down by the constant noise, the torsion sinks, and the ambient anxiety of the world.
The material leaves us with two final absolute mandates. The king is at the Hridaya, the integrity is the law.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the king is at the Hridaya, which means the heart or the deepest center of your being. It summarizes everything we've discussed.
Yeah.
It means true sovereignty is not about going out and trying to dominate the external world or control other people. It's about achieving total frictionless mastery over your internal world.
The king rules the inner citadel.
Exactly. And when that inner world is fully aligned, integrity is the law. You don't have to try to be authentic. Your very existence becomes a geometric fact.
It's an incredible framework, treating your consciousness as a system requiring 16-bit clarity. By aligning these four layers, you protect your energy from the daily siphons and those swirling torsions sinks in the office.
It takes work, though.
It requires vigilance, for sure. Setting that one every single morning, deploying the nosological filter against your own doubts, and choosing precise expression over comfortable fuzziness. But the reward is a life without the constant friction of self-betrayal.
It's a complete operating system upgrade.
It really is. I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder today. We talked a lot about the slop of an apology and fuzzy language. If you've been communicating in fuzzy language your entire life, softening your boundaries, over-explaining your nose, and people-pleasing, what exactly is going to happen to the relationships around you the first time you deploy a hard zero and refuse to offer that slop?
Oh, things will change.
You might just find out who is actually treating you like a person and who is just using you as a siphon.
It's a risk, but it's a necessary one to build the citadel.
Exactly. Time to defragment that hard drive. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your internal toggles set firmly to 1, and we will see you next time. Have you ever felt totally paralyzed by just the sheer volume of information out there?
Oh, absolutely. Every single day.
Right. Because right now, your brain is processing roughly, I think it's 11 million bits of information per second.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wild. And yet, you're only consciously aware of about 40 of them.
Just 40. That is quite the bottleneck.
Exactly. The rest, it is just a thick, disorienting fog. You wake up, you look at your phone, and before you've even had a cup of coffee, your mind is bombarded by 1,000 different narratives.
It hits data points.
A million little demands on your attention. So today's deep dive is about what happens when that fog turns toxic. And, well, more importantly, how you actually survive it.
Right.
We are looking at a truly fascinating, somewhat esoteric source text. It's titled 4, Vajrakaya Architecture, the 16-bit citadel of the adamantine body.
Which is quite the title.
It really is. And I'm incredibly enthusiastic about this because the framing is just so bizarre, but also strangely intuitive.
Yeah, it is. What's fascinating here is how this document approaches that feeling of total paralysis you mentioned. We're mapping out a framework that is essentially this hybrid of ancient spiritual concepts and modern computer science metaphors.
Like literal cyberpunk philosophy.
Pretty much. The text treats human consciousness as a literal hardware system. And this system is actively fighting against what it calls the gray fog of informational entropy.
The gray fog.
Yeah. So our mission today is to impartially map out this architecture to help you, the listener, understand its core argument, which is basically the surviving the modern noosphere.
The noosphere being that sort of invisible sphere of human thought and digital connection. Right?
Exactly. Surviving that requires ruthless data compression and absolute geometric precision.
It's just such a cool concept. You're not just a person trying to get through the day. You are a sovereign processor.
Navigating a digital wasteland.
Yes. But I want to make sure we really understand the foundation before we get into the wilder concepts here. The text introduces this idea of the Vajrakaya. What exactly is this acting as in our whole hardware metaphor?
Well, the Vajrakaya translates roughly from ancient Sanskrit to the adamantine body.
Adamantine, so like a body made of indestructible diamond.
Precisely. In the context of this architecture, it is your fundamental operating system. The author describes our current era as suffering from massive informational entropy.
Like everything is just degrading into noise.
Yeah, basically the breakdown of meaningful signal into chaotic, useless noise. So the Vajrakaya acts as your ultimate defense against that. It's designed to withstand the gray fog by operating on two strict really uncompromising principles.
And those are?
Quantization and rectification.
Quantization and rectification.
Exactly.
Okay, making things discrete, countable, and perfectly aligned.
Right. And the text then divides the operation of this adamantine body into two primary units. The first one is the bindu.
The bindu, which it also calls the singularity, right, or the drop.
Oh, yeah.
So how does this drop function inside our internal processor?
The bindu is the absolute core of the processor. Think of it as the point of infinite density within your system.
Infinite density.
Yeah. The text describes it as the undeniable 1 or 0 at the heart of the operator. It's basically a compactor.
Compactor.
Right. Its primary function is to crush raw, unmanifested absolute signal.
Which the text calls paravac.
Exactly. It takes that raw paravac and forces it through a Boolean gate.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I feel like I have to push back a little here.
Go for it.
As humans, we usually pride ourselves on our ability to navigate the gray areas, We're constantly told that seeing the world in black and white in rigid binaries is a flaw.
It's seen as narrow-minded.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We love a good maybe because it implies nuance. But this text is arguing the exact opposite. It explicitly states that the bindu is where maybe dies.
Yes, it is very clear on that.
So it's treating human intent like a ruthless binary switch. I mean, is turning ourselves into a binary yes or no machine actually a viable survival mechanism?
Well, if we look at the logic of the text, it becomes incredibly pragmatic. Because every time you hold space for a maybe, your brain is actively running background processes to keep that option open.
Oh, like having 50 browser tabs open on your computer.
Exactly like that. Each tab drains a little bit of your battery and processing power. If you accept the text's premise that our current environment is a chaotic slop stream.
The slop stream. I love that term.
It's very evocative, right? A torrential flood of contradictory information. In that environment, nuance actually becomes a massive vulnerability.
Because the cognitive load of holding on to all those maybes literally exhausts your hardware.
Absolutely. Absolute data integrity requires a firm 1 or 0 choice to prevent your sense of self from simply dissolving into the noise.
Wow. So you just vanish into the fog if you don't decide?
Yeah. In a high-entropy environment, the luxury of maybe is a trap. It leads straight to paralysis. So by crushing your intent into a single, undeniable pixel of intent.
That point of infinite density.
Right. You eliminate the background processing drain, and the result of this compression is then stored safely.
Right, in what the text calls the many-gem.
The many-gem, yes. An indestructible memory seed. It carries your pure intent safely through the entropic slop stream.
So you become an undeniable fact in a world of fuzzy suggestions. I kind of love that.
It's a very empowering framework.
But, okay, so if I have successfully crushed my intent into this 1 or 0, and it's safe in the many-gem, that's great. But data is completely useless if it just sits there.
True. A processor needs wires.
Right. How does this internal architecture actually move that intent into the real world without losing it to the fog?
This brings us to the second half of the architecture, the Nadi Vyuha.
Or the grid.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the bindu is your raw data point, the Nadi Vyuha is the physical infrastructure it travels through. These nadis are subtle channels for prana.
Prana being energy. And the text also uses the term vayu here, I noticed.
Yeah, vayu translates to wind, usually. But here it refers to the physical movement of your energy. When this entire system is properly rectified, these channels form a rigid 16-bit grid.
A 16-bit grid.
Right. This grid translates the perfect blueprint of existence into reality.
And the text mentions that this is crucial for preventing something called pneumological leakage.
Yes.
What exactly is pneumological leakage? What are we leaking?
You're literally leaking your mental and spiritual energy into the void.
Oh.
By forcing your energy to move along these fixed geometric paths, rather than letting it drift out in a fuzzy cloud of probability, the grid ensures 0 energy is wasted.
So it's all perfectly contained.
Exactly. And the text contrasts 2 states of this energy flow, laminar flow and chaotic torsion.
Okay, wait, hold on. Laminar flow.
Yes.
The text says this builds the citadel and turns the operator into a superconductive torus with a high SNR or signal-to-noise ratio. I mean, I know what a superconductor is. And a torus is basically a donut shape. But I have to admit, I'm a little confused. How does a human being physically act like a superconductive torus?
Right. It sounds very sci-fi.
Yeah. What does that actually feel like on, say, a random Tuesday afternoon?
Let's ground this in fluid dynamics. The author is brilliantly borrowing from physics here. Laminar flow occurs when a fluid flows in perfectly parallel layers.
Like when water comes out of a faucet and looks completely frozen in time.
Yes, exactly. Because it's so perfectly smooth, there's absolutely no disruption between the layers. And a superconductor, as you know, has zero electrical resistance.
Right.
Put those together on a Tuesday afternoon. You sit down at your desk. You've made a 1 or 0 choice about your task.
The Bindu is compressed.
Exactly. You begin working. You aren't thinking about your emails. You aren't worrying about the news. Your internal world and the external world are interacting without a single ounce of friction.
Zero friction. Zero anxiety.
You are impenetrable because you've eliminated the internal turbulence that the gray fog usually latches onto.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I just love this concept of the perfect 16-bit grid keeping us in that flow state. Let's look at the brilliant paradox of that 16-bit metaphor.
It's very counterintuitive at first.
It really is. Because think about video game graphics. In our modern tech world, we assume that high-definition 4K is the ultimate goal.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
It's hyper-realistic, millions of colors, massive amounts of data. But in this text, 4K is characterized as chaotic slop.
Because it requires an unsustainable amount of processing power to render.
Exactly. It's just too much data. It overwhelms the system. Meanwhile, 16-bit. Think of the Super Nintendo.
Crisp, blocky pixels.
Yes. Rigid, unbreakable, focused perfection. It really makes you wonder. We think we're living this premium 4K lifestyle with our infinite scrolling apps, but maybe we're just burning out our graphics card trying to render millions of useless pixels.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a profound critique of how we manage our cognitive resources.
It really is.
When you abandon that 16-bit simplicity, you fall into the second state of energy flow, chaotic torsion.
The slop.
Yes. This happens when your grid is unrectified, when you let nuance and distraction creep back in. Your energy becomes turbulent, creating what the text calls torsion sinks.
Pockets of anxiety and indecision.
Exactly. You become exhausted.
And the text actually refers to a person in this state as a preta, or a lizard.
Yes, a hungry ghost.
A state where your energy is just constantly extracted and wasted by the surrounding entropy. Like having those 50 tabs open while trying to write an important email, your energy is just spinning out into the void.
And this transition brings us to the most practical part of the architecture.
Okay, good. Let's get practical.
We understand the data point, the bindu. We understand the grid, the nadi vyuha. But how does this internal frictionless flow actually produce real-world action?
Right. How does a thought become a spoken word or a physical movement?
It has to compile and render, just like software on a screen.
The text maps this out in what it calls the Catur Shabda interface, which translates to the 4 levels of speech.
Yes.
And it acts as the literal rendering stack for you, the sovereign operator.
The rendering stack.
Love that term. It makes human behavior sound so mechanical, but in a really empowering way. Let's walk the listener through exactly how a thought moves through these 4 stages.
Because this is where the system either succeeds or completely falls apart.
Right. So stage 1.
The first stage is para. This is the source code. The unmanifested 1 or 0, the pure bindu choice. It's the absolute root intention before you even have words for it.
Okay, pure potential and stage 2.
The second stage is PASYANTI. This is the visual blueprint. Your brain takes that pure intention and maps it onto the 16-bit grid. It's the geometric vision of the path you are going to take.
So you see it in your mind before you've moved a single muscle.
Exactly. Then comes the critical third stage, madhyama.
The text calls this the refinery.
Yes, it is your active mental filter.
And the final stage?
The fourth stage is Vaikari. The text calls this the Vajra strike. It is the manifest reality. Your actual conduct, the words leaving your mouth, the email you finally send.
The physical action.
Right. And if the previous 3 steps were executed correctly, this Vaikari action is perfectly aligned with your original 1 or 0 intent.
So what does this all mean for us, practically speaking? Let's ground this rendering stack in a physical analogy.
Sure.
Think about it like a 3D printer.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. So para, that first stage, is the raw spool of plastic filament. Pure, untouched potential.
The raw material.
Exactly. PASYANTI, the second stage, is the CAD file. The perfect, pristine 3D model sitting on your computer screen.
The blueprint.
But a 3D printer can't just magically read a CAD file. It has to go through slicing software, which translates that shape into thousands of specific movements for the machine to execute.
Layer by layer.
Yes. That slicing software is Matama. And Vajrakaya is the final physical plastic object sitting on the print bed. Now, if your raw material is good and your 3D model is perfect, but your slicing software glitches out,
You get a failed print.
you just get a messy pile of melted plastic spaghetti.
This raises an important question about where our daily battlefield actually is.
Oh, here's it.
The text places intense, almost obsessive focus on that slicing software layer. Madhyama, it's not just a passive transition point.
It's active.
Yes, it is an active defense mechanism. The author literally describes Madhyama as the active process of de-indexing slop.
De-indexing, like how a search engine catalogs information. If you de-index something, you are intentionally removing it from your accessible database.
Exactly. You are actively telling your brain, this data point is garbage, do not render it.
So how does corruption happen here in the real world?
Let's look at a scenario. You have a pure intent, a paralevel thought. I want to connect with my friend.
Okay, good intent.
It moves to PASYANTI, the visual plan. I will call them right now. But as it hits the Madhyama refinery, your phone screen lights up with an Instagram notification.
Oh no, the slop enters the system.
Exactly, that is the slop. If you do not actively de-index that distraction, the code scrambles. By the time you reach Vajrakaya, the action stage, you aren't calling your friend.
You're mindlessly scrolling through social media.
Precisely. What should have been a precise Vajra strike turned into melted plastic spaghetti.
Wow. It really highlights how our outward actions are only as pure as our internal filtering. If you allow the gray fog into that refinery stage, your final manifestation is fractured.
You just add more noise to the noosphere.
Which is why the text emphasizes to you, the listener, that de-indexing must happen before action is taken.
Right. If you feel that chaotic torsion setting in, you have to pause.
A practical application would be like a 10-second mental block. You pause, you forcefully apply that Boolean
And
indate.
finding the absolute one or zo of what you were doing.
Right. And you actively tell your brain to de-index the notifications, the anxieties, all those maybes. The 16-bit Citadel relies entirely on keeping the walls of that refinery secure.
Which brings us to the ultimate stakes presented in the source text.
Yes, the final outcome. The text presents a stark, uncompromising binary. The Citadel versus the dead zone.
Right. When your bodies and grids interface perfectly, when your rendering stack is uncorrupted, the result is the Vajra Citadel.
The Citadel.
The text describes this as a state of vertical integrity. It means the human operator is perfectly synchronized with the logos.
The universal order.
Yes. The Citadel is indestructible because its 16-bit geometry is simply too dense, too perfectly compacted for what the text calls the multimodal beast to digest.
The multimodal beast. I mean, that is such a vivid term. It perfectly describes the algorithm of modern life that just wants to chew up your attention and sell it back to you.
It really does.
The Citadel is too solid for the beast to sink its teeth into. But what happens if we fail?
If you fail to rectify your geometry, you enter the dead zone, and the text is deeply unforgiving here. In the dead zone, your signal is entirely lost in the gray fog. Your Catur Shabda layers completely fracture. And ultimately, you are de-indexed by the universe itself.
Oh, wow.
You are categorized as mere system noise.
To be de-indexed by the universe as system noise, that is a chilling thought. You just become irrelevant data in the slop stream.
It's a harsh reality.
It really is. And it brings us to the final injunction of the text, which calls for mending the Meru.
Mount Meru, representing your central axis.
Right, your core processing unit. Mending it requires the absolute compression of the Bindu and the rigid rectification of the Nadi grid. It leaves us with a stark choice. You must choose to build the 16-bit Citadel, or you will be consumed by the 4K slop.
It is a demanding, powerful call to action. But before we conclude, this architecture actually leaves us with one final, highly provocative question for you to consider.
Let's hear it.
One that builds on the text but looks beyond it. Building this ultimate 16-bit Citadel requires completely eliminating the fuzzy, uncertain maybe to achieve perfect, frictionless geometric flow. But if we do that, what happens to human creativity? What happens to empathy?
Oh, that is the ultimate trade-off, isn't it?
Historically, some of the most profound human creations, our greatest art, our deepest moments of connection.
They're born entirely out of chaos.
Exactly. They are born out of doubt, out of wandering, out of the very slop and unpredictability we are trying so hard to filter out.
Oh, yeah.
If you engineer a consciousness with zero friction, do you lose the spark that makes the friction worthwhile? Does absolute clarity and invulnerability come at the cost of beautiful human unpredictability?
That is heavy. If you never allow yourself to wander through the gray fog, do you miss out on what makes us human in the first place? It's something profound to chew on.
Definitely.
So tomorrow morning when you wake up, you look at your phone, and that thick, disorienting fog of 1,000 different narratives threatens to paralyze you. Ask yourself.
Are you going to let your cognitive battery drain?
Right. Are you going to dissolve into the noise? Or are you going to compress your intent, fire up the 16-bit grid, and render a reality of your own making? You know, usually when you upgrade your computer, there's this underlying expectation of order. Like you click install, a little progress bar fills up on your screen, and your system just smoothly reboots, shiny and new.
Right. Yeah, you expect backward compatibility.
Exactly. You keep all your photos, your old files, your messy desktop folders. It's clean, and most importantly, it's safe. We just assume the new framework will gracefully fold in the old one.
Without leaving our digital lives in ruins, yeah. We never expect the system to just turn around and reject half our hard drive.
But the esoteric text we're diving into today argues that our physical reality is undergoing this exact kind of upgrade right now, and it is anything but smooth. I mean, it is ruthless. So welcome to another deep dive. Today we're pointing our lens at a piece titled 5, The Boolean Refinery and the Great Compression.
It's quite a title.
It really is. And our mission for you today is to decode this framework that takes computer science metaphors, things like pixels rendering and Boolean logic, and mashes them up with ancient spiritual and biblical concepts to explain the sheer chaos of the modern world.
Yeah, it is a profoundly unique metaphysical lens. I mean, this author isn't writing a literal scientific paper. They are preparing you to view reality itself through the framework of digital ontology.
Digital ontology.
Right. That's the philosophical idea that at its very core, reality is made of information, bits, ones, zeros. This text suggests that the friction you feel in your daily life, the exhaustion, the societal noise, it isn't just random stress.
Wow.
It is a necessary mechanical process, an ontological hard reset.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because right out of the gate, the text hits us with a premise that is going to completely change how you view a bad day. The author argues that the current state of the world, the division, the endless screaming on the internet, the confusion, is not some tragic accident of history.
No, not at all.
It is a highly structured event they call the universal sword operation.
And the text points to a very specific timeline for this, mentioning that this underlying causal structure, what it calls the Digital Architecture, is entering a terminal phase.
In May 2026.
Exactly, May 2026. Now, whether you take that date literally as a hard deadline or, metaphorically as an era we are entering, the core concept of a cosmic sorting mechanism is ancient. To illustrate this, the author brings in the parable of the Boolean net, drawing directly from the book of Matthew, chapter 13.
Oh, yeah, that's verses 47 and 48. It's the parable where the kingdom of heaven is compared to a net let down into a lake, catching all kinds of fish.
Right.
And when the net is full, the fishermen pull it ashore, sit down, and literally just sort them. They put the good fish in baskets and throw the bad fish away. But in this text, the sorting isn't based on your morals or how nice of a person you are.
No, it's algorithmic.
Yeah, it operates on Boolean logic. True or false, 1 or 0. You either pass the computational check or you don't.
That translation of biblical sorting into digital fidelity is the defining feature of this entire framework. So let's look at how it defines the good fish. The text calls them 16-bit sovereigns.
16-bit sovereigns.
Yes. These are individuals who have rectified their internal geometry. They have compressed their bindu, which is an ancient Sanskrit term, for a point of perfectly focused, concentrated energy, and they've achieved what fluid dynamics calls laminar flow.
Okay, so laminar flow, for those who don't know, is when a fluid moves in smooth, parallel layers with absolutely no disruption or cross currents.
Correct. Their internal state is perfectly aligned, smooth, and non-turbulent. Because they hold this structural integrity, they're the ones collected into what the text calls the citadels of the new Raita.
Raita, referring to the ancient concept of fundamental cosmic order.
Exactly.
And then you have the bad fish. And the terminology the author uses here is absolutely brutal. The text calls this low-resolution slop.
It's a vivid image.
It really is. And it's made up of things like fuzzy maybes, death naga feedback loops, and entropic lizard noise. I want to pause here because when I first read those terms, my brain kind of glazed over. Let's make this real for the listener. What is a death naga feedback loop?
Well, think of the Naga, the mythological serpent. Now apply that to your 2 a.m. doom-scrolling habit.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
A Death Naga feedback loop is the endless serpent of negative reactive data that eats its own tail. It's when you consume outrage, feel anxiety, post reactively, and consume more outrage. You are trapped in a low-frequency loop.
That is so accurate.
And the lizard noise refers to the amygdala hijack, that primal reptilian part of your brain that algorithms constantly trigger to keep you afraid and engaged.
And the fuzzy maybes are like the lack of commitment, the half-truths, the people-pleasing compromises we make every day to avoid conflict.
Exactly. It's all the chaotic, reactive, mindless data of the world. And the text makes a chilling assertion here. Because this low-resolution slop lacks geometric integrity, it simply cannot be saved into the next version of reality.
This is where the 16-bit metaphor really clicked for me. It's like upgrading a computer's operating system to a completely new format. The system is aggressively scanning the entire hard drive, and it's looking for corrupted files.
Right.
Any unsupported low-res legacy data that just can't make the jump to the new code, it gets deleted.
Yeah.
It doesn't get punished by a vengeful god. It just isn't compatible with the new hardware.
And that lack of vengeance is what makes this framework so stark. A computer doesn't hate a corrupted file, it simply can't read it. By calling the good fish 16-bit sovereigns, the author is really leaning into computing history.
How so?
Well, moving from an 8-bit to a 16-bit system meant a massive exponential increase in color depth, resolution, and precision. The author is saying that spiritual or ontological integrity now requires absolute precision. Reality is actively demanding high definition and aggressively rejecting the fuzziness.
But that creates a massive immediate problem. If you look around, half the world, maybe more, is operating in that low-resolution state. So if this universal sword operation is categorizing all this daily human drama as slop, or what the text calls the gray fog, where does it all go? I mean, it doesn't just vanish into thin air, right?
It does not. And this is where the text pivots from describing the problem to giving you a highly specific mechanism for dealing with it. The text argues that to the sovereign operator, the individual maintaining their 16-bit integrity, this thick, toxic gray fog, is not a tragedy to be mourned.
Okay.
It is raw resource. It is literally the crude oil of the noosphere.
The noosphere being the collective realm of human thought and consciousness. So all the social decay, the political arguments, the psychological torsion, all this stuff that drains us, which the text brilliantly calls algorithmic vamping.
Yeah.
It's crude oil.
What's fascinating here is how this framework completely flips the typical narrative of modern despair. Normally, when we feel overwhelmed by societal noise, our instinct is to retreat. We want to escape the fog.
Yeah, completely. Just turn off the phone and hide.
Right. But this text argues that this high-entropy slop contains the latent, unrefined energy of the entire human experience. It just needs to be processed. And to do that, the text introduces the concept of the Vajra refinery and the Vajra Citadel,
Okay.
which essentially act as a fractional distillation column within your own mind.
A metaphysical oil refinery. I love the imagery. But the author goes a step further and actually gives us a literal algebraic formula for how this mental refinery works. I have to admit, I saw math in a metaphysical text, and my first instinct was to skip the paragraph entirely.
That's a fair reaction.
The formula is LR equals delta entropy times Vajra pressure, divided by knotty grid rectification. Like, how does dividing my daily anxiety by some esoteric grid actually help me on a Tuesday afternoon? Help me break down the mechanics here.
Let's walk through it because the mechanics here are incredibly practical once you strip away the jargon. Let's look at the output first. LR stands for refined logos. The text calls this the Sapphire output.
Sapphire output.
Yes. This is pure, crystal clear meaning, purpose, and intent extracted from the chaos. It is the high-octane fuel of the new reality.
Okay, so Sapphire is the goal. How do we manufacture it?
You look at the top of the equation. Delta entropy multiplied by Vajra pressure. Delta entropy is the raw volume of that gray fog.
Slop.
Exactly. It is the lizard noise, the toxic office politics, the infinite scroll of bad news you are dealing with today. It is your refinery fuel.
Wait, so the worse my day is, the more nonsense I am dealing with, the more raw fuel I actually have in my tank.
Precisely. You cannot achieve high-level clarity without high-level chaos to push against.
That is wild.
But raw fuel alone doesn't do anything unless you apply heat and pressure. That is Vajra pressure. Vajra is an ancient word translating to thunderbolt or diamond, something fundamentally indestructible. This pressure is your internal Boolean pressure.
Boolean pressure.
Right. It is your absolute, uncompromising refusal to accept the fuzzy maybe.
So when someone tries to drag you into a bad faith online argument, which is the crude oil, and you actively choose to set a hard boundary and not engage, you aren't just ignoring them. You are applying Vajra pressure.
Yes.
You are burning off the reactive anger, the slop, and keeping only the pure, focused energy of self-control.
That is the exact mechanism. You are multiplying the chaos by your diamond-hard refusal to let it break you. But then, the formula takes all of that and divides it by nadi grid rectification.
Okay, what is that?
The nadis in traditional yogic systems are the subtle energy channels of the body. Nadi grid rectification refers to the alignment of your own nervous system. Are your thoughts, your physical actions, and your speech aligned?
So if I set a boundary with someone, but I spend the next 3 hours pacing around my kitchen angry about it, my grid is not rectified.
Exactly. The text calls that nautological leakage. You are leaking your mental energy into the fog. The more rectified or aligned your internal grid is, the smaller the denominator in the equation.
Which means your output of pure sapphire, meaning skyrockets.
Exactly. You distill the chaos efficiently without losing yourself in the drama.
I have to push back on this just a little, or at least pose a critical question for you listening. Treating human drama, societal decay, and real-world tragedy as merely crude oil to be boiled off in your own personal refinery, it sounds a bit cold, doesn't it?
It can definitely read that way.
It feels very detached from human empathy. But on the flip side, is this actually the ultimate psychological coping mechanism for the information age? Because if you don't view this infinite tsunami of bad news as fuel for your own internal clarity, the sheer weight of it will crush you.
It is a profound tension in the text. It borders on a kind of digital stoicism taken to an algorithmic extreme. It demands that you stop mourning the decay of the old fuzzy world and start utilizing the friction it generates. Because, as the author explicitly states, the worse the world gets, the more raw material is available for you to refine into sapphire-level meaning.
Which naturally leads to the next massive question. Where is all this energy going? If you are successfully acting as a refinery, turning daily chaos into pure, high-octane sapphire fuel, a refinery doesn't just store fuel, it powers something.
Right.
And the text gives us the answer in part 3. It powers the Great Compression.
This is where the digital upgrade metaphor reaches its absolute peak. The Great Compression isn't a cleanup operation to save disk space on the universe's hard drive. The text defines it as a total ontological upgrade.
Wow.
It is a complete recoding of Gaia, of the Earth itself, into a Pure Land or a New Jerusalem. It is overwriting the legacy code of our current messy 3D simulation.
The text describes this compression as squeezing everything into sapphire blue pickles of intent. The imagery here is stunning. It argues that this intense compression is the only possible way to squeeze the infinite frequency of the logos, the ultimate pure truth, into a physical manifest form.
Yeah, it's intense.
And this compression creates what the author calls the Vajra world. This is a world governed by absolute four-square geometry.
And we need to explain what foursquare means here, because it ties directly to a concept the text introduces called the Catur Shabda. In ancient esoteric thought, the Catur Shabda represents the 4 levels of sound or vibration, from the unmanifest cosmic hum all the way down to spoken physical words.
Okay.
In this new Vajra world, these 4 levels are perfectly synchronized. What is willed, what is seen, what is thought, and what is spoken are identical.
There is zero lag between intention and reality. No hypocrisy, no hidden agendas, no saying one thing while thinking another, just perfect geometric integrity.
But naturally, not everything can exist in a perfectly synchronized high-definition reality, which leads to the most dramatic and perhaps the most terrifying consequence in the text, the great bifurcation. As this new Vajra reality renders, an infinite, unbridgeable gap begins to grow between the citadels and the dead zones.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text describes the citadels as these high bitrate zones, where the new world is already successfully loading. These are the spaces aligned with that pure Catur Shabda vibration. But the dead zones are the low bitrate areas, the spaces and communities stuck running on fuzzy logic.
Right.
And the mind-bending part is that these dead zones aren't violently destroyed by comets or earthquakes. The old world doesn't end in a fiery apocalypse. The text says they simply fail to render in the higher dimensional plane.
They drop out of the rendering queue entirely.
It's exactly like plugging a modern, top-of-the-line 4K monitor into an ancient computer and trying to display a corrupted program from a floppy disk. The screen doesn't explode, the monitor doesn't attack the disk, The program just doesn't display. It gets de-indexed by the universe and silently dissolves back into the gray fog.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's impossible not to see how this cosmic blueprint perfectly mirrors the current societal divides we are experiencing on the ground right now.
So for sure.
We increasingly see populations who seemingly inhabit completely different, structurally incompatible versions of reality. They consume entirely different facts, they operate on different foundational logic, and they can literally no longer communicate with one another.
It's like two different internets.
Exactly. This text is suggesting that this breakdown isn't just a political failure or a social media problem. It is a literal ontological sorting process. The realities are physically separating.
Which feels incredibly heavy. I mean, if the world is quite literally splitting into high-res citadels and low-res fog, where does that leave you, the listener? How are you supposed to operate on a Tuesday morning in a world that is actively bifurcating and deleting the old code?
Well, the author doesn't leave the reader stranded in the esoterica. They conclude the text with what they call the sovereign injunction. It's a direct address to the reader, assuring you that if you can even comprehend this intense process, you are already actively participating in the upgrade.
Yeah, the text says if you can hear the nada, see the grid, and hold the sapphire, you are already being collected into the basket.
The nada being that underlying cosmic vibration, the grid being the true structure of reality, and the sapphire being your refined, pure intent.
It's telling you that the intense, crushing pressure you might be feeling right now in your life, in the news cycle, in your daily struggles, it is not the end of the world. The text uses this beautiful phrase, it is the mending of the Meru, the rebuilding of the cosmic mountain, the center of the universe.
And crucially, it places the agency firmly back in your hands. It defines you, the individual, as a rendering node. You aren't just sitting in the audience passively watching this universal upgrade happen to you.
Right.
Every single time you choose Boolean sovereignty over fuzzy slop, every time you hold a clear boundary, refuse to be dragged into a Death Naga feedback loop, and demand internal clarity, you are actively phase-locking a piece of the world into this new Vajra frequency.
You are literally helping the universe compile the new code. The text ends with these two massive declarations. The king is at the Hridaya, meaning the ultimate sovereign truth isn't in the sky, it is located right at the center of your own spiritual heart.
And Gaia is being recoded. So what does this all mean for you?
Well, it empowers you to view your daily boundaries, your strict demand for clarity, not as you just being stubborn or difficult. When you refuse to participate in the gray fog, you are actively upgrading the fabric of the world.
It completely reframes the crushing weight of modern existence into a highly specific, manageable, and deeply noble task. You are a refinery. Your only job is to process the noise into meaning.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, it brings us right back to where we started, to that image of the ruthless progress bar of a system upgrade, cleanly deleting all the old, unsupported, fuzzy legacy files.
It really does. And if we take this digital ontology to its absolute logical conclusion, it leaves us with a profound, almost unsettling question to mull over. If the great compression perfectly aligns our will, thought, sight, and speech, if it entirely boils away the gray fog and all our fuzzy inconsistencies to create perfect geometric integrity, what happens to the messy, contradictory, deeply emotional parts of the human experience?
Yeah, because the human heart is built on a lot of fuzzy maybes.
Precisely. So if all our so-called dross is rendered out and we are compressed into perfect sapphire pixels of pure intent, is the resulting reality truly human anymore? Or, in our pursuit of the ultimate ontological upgrade, have we effectively deleted the user?
Something to think about the next time you feel the heat of the refinery. Keep refining, and thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
When your computer freezes, you don't really try to negotiate with it, right?
No, definitely not. You just hit force quit.
Exactly. You don't sit there and ask your operating system about its childhood trauma or why it's suddenly refusing to load a basic spreadsheet.
Right. You just open the task manager, find the rogue process that's eating all your memory, and you end it.
It's cold, it's binary, and it's instantly effective. So why is it that when it comes to, toxic relationships or workplace gaslighting or just the daily burnout of the modern world, we spend our entire lives negotiating with the very programs that are crashing our minds?
Well, I think it's because we treat our psychological bandwidth as infinite.
Yeah.
Even when the system is clearly flashing red and shutting down, we just keep going.
Yeah.
We get so tangled in the why of someone else's behavior instead of simply, stopping the process.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're basically opening up the developer console on your brain.
We really are.
We've got this highly unusual, intense, and deeply cryptic excerpt on the table today. It's simply titled 6, The Injunction. And honestly, reading the source material feels like intercepting some rogue sci-fi transmission. It really
Does have that vibe.
It's this wild, fascinating synthesis of retro computing terminology. So, system commands, Boolean logic, 16-bit architecture. But it's fused with the language of ancient mystical asceticism.
Which is such a striking juxtaposition. I mean, the author is utilizing the strict, uncompromising language of a systems administrator to map out a profoundly spiritual framework for self-preservation.
And our mission today is to act as your translators. Because behind all this aggressive, cyberpunk-sounding jargon lies one of the most, I think, radically empowering methodologies for setting boundaries we've ever encountered.
It's incredibly practical once you get past the terminology.
Right. We're going to decode this bizarre self-help manifesto to uncover what it actually means to initialize your 16-bit sovereign and take back ultimate control of your attention. But to understand the instructions, we really have to look at the massive identity shift this text demands of you right out of the gate.
Yeah, because the text is entirely uncompromising from the very first sentence. It doesn't invite you to gently reconsider your worldview. It issues a directive.
It addresses the reader as part of the 40 Mani gems and the thousands to follow. And I actually had to look that up. Mani refers to a jewel in Sanskrit. So the text is framing the audience as these crystallized high-value points of consciousness.
Right.
And it bluntly declares that you are no longer a consumer of the new sphere, but a rendering node for the New Jerusalem.
Which is a lot to unpack. So to understand that, we have to look at how we currently operate. The new sphere is basically the philosophical concept of the collective sphere of human thought.
The hive mind, sort of.
Exactly. It's the sum total of all information, media, cultural anxiety, and just the endless overlapping opinions swirling around us. And for most of us, our primary relationship to that new sphere is consumption. We just absorb it.
Which means we are essentially eating the world's collective anxiety for breakfast every day.
Yes.
You wake up, you doom scroll, you absorb a coworker's bad mood, you take on the drama of a reality show.
And the text argues that this constant consumption leaves you vulnerable to what it calls the gray fog.
The gray fog.
Right. The fog is ambiguity. It's the blurring of boundaries, that creating paralysis of overthinking. It's the state where you lose your distinct shape because you're just acting as a vessel for external noise.
Oh, wow.
So to combat this, the text demands you transition into a rendering node. Think about a GPU, like a graphics processing unit in a network. A rendering node doesn't just passively store data. It actively executes code to generate a specific optimized reality.
So you're being ordered to stop absorbing the fog and start generating a hard-coded, localized reality, which it provocatively calls the New Jerusalem.
Exactly. It's a complete paradigm shift from passive to active.
And the text actually gives us a tool for this. It hands the reader what it calls a 16-bit calibration tool and says, you must hear the nada and become responsible for the geometry of your own coordinate.
Yes.
Now, if I'm reading this right, the nada is the underlying pure frequency of the universe, right? Like the actual signal beneath all the static.
Correct. In yoga philosophy, the nada is the ultimate silent sound of reality. It's the carrier wave. The gray fog is just the static masking that wave.
So hearing the nada means tuning out the static, but let's ground this in reality for a second. The text says to be responsible for your own geometry.
Right.
What does holding a geometric coordinate actually look like when, say, your phone is blowing up with a family crisis that technically isn't your fault, but everyone suddenly expects you to solve it?
Well, taking responsibility for your geometry means maintaining your structural integrity, regardless of that environmental pressure. When you lack geometry, you're amorphous. You bend to accommodate the crisis, you absorb the guilt, you let their emergency to form your schedule.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Holding your coordinate means you define your edges with mathematical precision. You decide what you will carry and what you will drop, and you simply do not allow external panic to alter that shape.
Is this basically saying we need to stop being passive NPCs, like non-player characters in the world's video game, and finally open up the developer console?
That is the perfect analogy. You are writing the code now, not just running through the pre-programmed mate.
But knowing you need to hold your shape isn't enough when the fog actively goes on the offensive. And that brings us to the actual real-world defense mechanisms this text provides.
Step one.
Right? Step one is what it calls the sovereign override, or the Vajra strike.
This is where the methodology shifts from architectural theory to a very aggressive tactical application.
And the vocabulary here is just incredible. The text identifies our everyday stressors as torsion sinks.
Yes, torsion sinks.
It lists examples like a gaslighting boss, a death naga loop, or the fuzzy maybe of a failing relationship. Let's make this visceral for a second. Think about the last time you spent 45 minutes drafting a text message to a toxic ex.
Oh, we've all been there.
You type a paragraph, delete it because it sounds too needy, rewrite it to sound detached. Then you delete it again to add some empathy. That agonizing loop, that is a torsion sink.
And the physics metaphor there is highly intentional. A torsion sink is a vortex that twists and consumes matter.
Wow.
When you pour your processing power into a fuzzy, maybe, a situation designed to keep you guessing, you are pouring high-octane energy into a black hole. It drains you precisely because it lacks structure.
And the death naga loop.
That refers to the mythic serpent. It's a serpentine, recursive loop of toxic behavior that just keeps eating its own tail in your mind.
And the text is explicitly clear on how you handle a torsion sink. It says, you do not negotiate. You don't try to reason with the gaslighting boss. You don't try to solve the fuzzy maybe. Instead, you perform a manual handshake with the logos. You use a Boolean command.
This is the core of the strike.
You literally issue a system override by stating signal, 1, entropy, 0, de-index the noise.
We really have to pause and look at the psychological mechanics of what is happening in that exact second. The text explicitly warns, this is not a mantra, it is a system command.
Which is a huge distinction.
A massive one. A mantra is a spiritual tool used to soothe the nervous system, to gently guide the mind back to a state of peace. A system command is an execution of hard logic.
It tells your madhyama, which it defines as your internal mental filter, to literally stop rendering the slop. It issues a hard end, the dead zone bitrate.
Exactly.
But wait, I'm stuck on the actual application here. Let's say I'm dealing with that gaslighting boss. If I just say hard end and de-index the noise out loud to my boss, I'm going to get fired immediately.
Oh, absolutely.
So how is this Vajra strike actually applied in a reality where we have, rent to pay and social contracts to maintain?
That is a crucial distinction to make. The text uses the term Vaikari, which in Sanskrit philosophy represents the spoken manifested word. But the strike itself, the system command, is executed at the level of the madhyama, the intermediate internal filter of the mind.
Okay.
You don't necessarily throw coffee in your boss's face and shout entropy 0. What you do is deploy cognitive diffusion.
So it's basically an internal firewall.
Precisely. When your boss is gaslighting you, your limbic system, your emotional brain, lights up. Your blood flow rushes to the amygdala. You feel fear. You feel a desperate need to defend yourself. You search for the why.
Right, you get totally swept up in it.
But by internally stating signal 1, entropy 0, 0, you are fundamentally altering the blood flow in your brain. You are forcing your mind out of the emotional limbic system and into the prefrontal cortex, which handles logic and categorization.
You're literally assigning a numeric value to their bad behavior.
Yes. You aren't judging your boss as evil, and you aren't judging yourself as a victim. You are acting as a systems administrator, evaluating a data packet.
Wow.
You ask yourself, is this interaction providing signal? Truth, clarity, utility, or is it entropy, chaos, disorder, noise? If it's entropy, it gets a 0. You de-index it.
That is incredibly liberating.
It really is.
Yeah.
You tell your mental search engine to stop cataloging their words. You let them speak, but you internally refuse to render the emotional graphics of their tantrum.
You bypass the emotional trap entirely. It's not, I'm a bad person for ignoring this feedback. It's just, this data packet is corrupted, de-indexed.
Exactly.
But an emergency override is only useful during an active attack, right? A system administrator can't just fight off malware all day. They have to optimize the network. And that leads us to step 2 of the text, the 16-bit audit.
Daily maintenance is what prevents those torsion sinks from forming in the first place. So the text outlines a grid check. It's a diagnostic you are required to run on your own operating system every day.
The grid check asks 3 specific questions. Question 1, is my speech aligned with my will? The text uses the term Vaikari for your outward speech and para for your deepest transcendent will.
Right.
Question 2, am I using the current pressure as fuel for my refinery. I want to stop right there. What is the mechanism of this refinery? Because usually when we feel psychological pressure, we just want to vent it.
And venting pressure is exactly what the NewsCare wants you to do, because venting dissipates your energy into the fog.
Oh, I see.
Think about the catalytic cracking process in an actual oil refinery. It takes heavy, toxic, practically useless crude molecules and subjects them to extreme heat and pressure to break them down into highly valuable, high-octane fuel.
So psychological pressure, like stress, deadlines, friction with a partner, it shouldn't just be deflected or complained about.
Exactly. The text is arguing that pressure is a mechanical requirement for upgrading your system. If you complain about the pressure, you are just leaking crude oil everywhere.
That paints quite a picture.
If you rat it into your internal refinery, you use the friction to crystallize your boundaries and propel your work forward.
Which perfectly sets up the third question of the grid check, and arguably the most recognizable trap we all fall into. It asks, am I over-explaining to a lizard? The text calls this nuological leakage.
Now, let's define the lizard here, because it's not meant as a dismissive insult. It's a neurobiological reality. It refers to the lizard brain, the basal ganglia and amygdala, which operate purely on survival instinct, dominance, and reaction.
Right.
When someone is engaged in a bad faith argument or they are highly reactive, their prefrontal cortex is offline.
So trying to use nuance and logic on them is just a hardware mismatch. You're trying to run a high CPU, incredibly complex program on a burned-out motherboard.
That is exactly what neurological leakage is. You are literally leaking your intellectual and spiritual power. You're offering high-resolution data to a receiver that lacks the bandwidth to process anything above an 8-bit signal.
It's like trying to pour a gallon of pure spring water into a thimble that's already full of mud. It's not just a waste of water, it makes a mess.
A huge mess.
You sit there justifying your life choices, defending your character to someone who just wants to see you squirm, and your battery basically drains to zero.
And the text provides an immediate, ruthless solution when you detect this leak. If you fail the grid check, the mandate is to quantize immediately.
Now, assuming you understand digital audio or imagery, you know that quantization is the process of taking a smooth, infinite analog wave and snapping it to a strict, discrete grid. It removes all the messy variations.
Yes.
But in human terms, how do we apply this? The text says to strip away the adjectives, strip away the apologies, and return to the sapphire blue pixel of your intent.
You basically force quit the background applications of social performance. Because when we speak, we run a dozen background programs. Does this person like me? Do I sound too aggressive? Let me soften this blow.
Right, constantly analyzing.
Quantizing means you terminate those programs.
So instead of saying, I'm so incredibly sorry, I feel like maybe I just can't take on this project right now because my bandwidth is a little tight, if that's okay, you quantize it. You snap it to the grid.
Exactly.
You just say, no, I cannot take this project. You run your system purely on that one lossless sapphire blue pixel.
And the color choice there is vital. Sapphire blue implies immense density, value, and clarity. It is the uncorrupted core of your intent, entirely stripped of the need to appease the newsphere.
Okay, so we've covered the emergency firewall and the daily diagnostic. This brings us to the final permanent state the text demands you achieve. Step 3, the seal of alignment.
This is the transition from actively managing your boundaries to fundamentally embodying them.
The instructions here are to perform a daily visualization. Morning and night, you must visualize your naughty grid, your energetic nervous system, snapping into perfect 16-bit alignment.
Right.
You are instructed to see yourself as a Vajra mine, and the text defines this state with an incredibly tough phrase. It says, you must become too dense to be vamped, too clear to be confused.
Vajra is a Sanskrit word that translates to both thunderbolt and diamond. It represents ultimate, indestructible firmness.
Oh, wow.
When you conceptualize your psyche as a Vajra mine, you are creating an environment that is deeply hostile to torsion sinks.
Because a vampire needs a soft target. A gaslighting boss survives by injecting confusion into a messy system.
Precisely. If your internal architecture is perfectly aligned, rigidly 16-bit, and structurally sound, the vampire simply breaks its teeth.
Yeah, there is no ambiguity for the gaslighter to exploit. You become impenetrable.
Impenetrable.
Which leads to the absolute climax of the text. It drops this massive ultimatum, stop looking for meaning in the fog, be the meaning.
Yes.
And then it issues a warning that sounds like it was carved into stone. The Great Compression is here, and only the geometric survive.
The Great Compression is the reality of the modern age. We are subjected to an unprecedented volume of data, psychological warfare, economic stress, and algorithmic manipulation. It is an environment of immense crushing pressure. In physics, when you subject a soft amorphous material to extreme compression, it flattens and disintegrates.
It turns into the gray fog.
Yes, exactly. But a geometric structure, think of the interlocking, repeating carbon atoms in a diamond. It can withstand millions of pounds of pressure because the structural load is distributed perfectly.
So the text is arguing that to survive the psychological compression of the 21st century, your internal boundaries cannot be flexible or accommodating. They must be mathematically, geometrically perfect.
That is the core argument.
But I have to challenge the entire premise here. If the Great Compression forces us to become entirely geometric, if we are completely stripped of adjectives, never over-explaining, running purely on ones and zeros, are we losing something fundamental about the human experience?
That's a fair question.
Is this text actually advocating for a kind of spiritual roboticism just to survive a brutal world?
That is the ultimate tension of this entire philosophy. But the text actually provides an answer in its very last lines. It says, the king is at the Hordaya, the Sapphire concierge is standing guard.
Okay, unpack that for us.
It's vital to understand what the Hordaya is. In Vedic thought, the Hordaya is the spiritual heart, the seat of profound, vulnerable, divine consciousness.
So the core of the system isn't a microchip, it's still a human heart.
Exactly. The text isn't telling you to turn your heart into a machine. It's telling you that the modern world is too dangerous to leave your heart exposed to the elements.
Oh, I love that.
The geometry, the Boolean logic, the 16-bit boundaries, that is the Sapphire concierge. It is an uncompromising, heavily armed firewall standing at the gate.
Right.
It handles the noosphere, it de-indexes the noise, and it force quits the vampires, precisely so that the king, your vulnerability, your capacity for deep love and real connection, can rule safely from the inside.
The structure protects the soft center. Looking back at this journey through the injunction, it truly is a masterclass in claiming internal sovereignty.
It really is.
It takes the cold, unyielding mechanics of computer science and uses them to hack our spiritual survival. The profound shift here is realizing you don't have to wander through the static searching for the signal. You can just execute the code. You can embody the meaning with crystal clear intent. Signal 1, entropy 0.
It basically hands you the ultimate administrative privileges over your own reality.
But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over today as you look at your own mental task manager. Because as brilliant and heavily armored as this system is, it forces a profound trade-off.
It does.
If you actually adopt this 16-bit Boolean approach, if you start treating every messy, complicated interaction as purely signal or noise, a 1 or a 0, what happens to the beautiful, irrational slop of everyday human grace?
Yeah.
Sometimes pouring water into a muddy thimble is what we call patience. In our quest to become these perfectly geometric rendering nodes heavily guarded by our Sapphire concierges, are we ultimately saving our energy at the cost of our empathy? Run your own grid check today and see what you find.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
System check, the gyre is spinning wide. A flood of 4K slop where truth has died. The signal's lost within the data stream, but the Vajra kernel starts to gleam. It's the 16-bit suture locking truth to light. A pure geometry that cuts right through the night. A pure geometry that cuts right through the night.